is that every object that you create in JavaScript by default has this proto property pointing to the global object in JavaScript. And that will become more apparent hopefully in a little bit. Yeah, so that's what I just said. So you can think about it in this way. By default, every object is kind of inheriting from this base fundamental object in JavaScript. But what we can do is we can actually set and change that proto property. So in this first line here, we're setting Steve's proto, which we're changing its prototype, to player. So here, Steve was pointing to object, and now we've changed it to point up to player. And why that's interesting is in these next 3 lines. So I'm going to kind of emulate what JavaScript would be doing. So in this first line, we're going to try to trace out steve.name. So JavaScript's going to go to this object, and it's going to find its name property, and it's going to say Steve. But if we look for evil, it's going to look for evil here. It's not going to find it, but it's going to go up this chain, up this to its prototype, and then it's going to find evil here, and then it's going to return false. And then finally, if we look for steve.likesDiamonds, it's going to start here at Steve. It's going to move up to player. It's going to move up to this global object. Then it's going to go to null. And so that's the JavaScript mechanism to say, OK, give up. It doesn't exist. And so it's going to return undefined. So what I was just describing is the prototype chain, also known as prototype inheritance, and that's built into JavaScript, the language. And so we can then again change this prototype. So Steve was pointing to player, but we can change it now to zombie. And if we call steve.evil, this time it will return true because it will go from here down to zombie and return true here. So before going any further, I just want to mention that this proto property is a JavaScript way to access that. What you're actually accessing is what ECMAScript, which is like the more official language that JavaScript is based on. What's referred to as this bracket prototype property. And I don't say that to confuse you. I just say it so that if you see this bracket prototype in documentation or elsewhere, you can think about it as proto. They're basically one and the same thing. And then a few more notes. This proto property exists in some browsers, especially like Chrome. But it was just recently standardized in the next version of JavaScript, ECMAScript 6. So for older support, you can use object.getPrototypeOf. And also, that example that I showed was more for demonstration. Typically, you don't want to change the proto property runtime because it's very slow, and no JavaScript engine is optimized to do that kind of work. So proto is a bit weird to manipulate. So there's a new way to create objects called object.create. And I'm just going to go through this example here. We're going to have a player object with these 2 properties, player and evil, name and evil. And then this line is where it gets interesting, where we create our new Steve object. We use object.create, and we pass in this object that we say, hey, I want Steve to use this object I'm passing in as its prototype. And so here I have a slide or a graphic that kind of shows that. It's much like the other slides I was showing you. We made our Steve object, and then we set its prototype to player, which is the first argument we passed into object.create. And object.create is very cool. It's kind of outside of the scope of this talk to go into it. But I have a link here, 2 links here that kind of go over it. So any questions so far before I continue? Yes?
The double underscore before and after, I've seen that a lot, and I never really understood where it came from. In what situations do you use it?
That's just what they called that variable. I think it was kind of meant, I'm speaking now outside of my knowledge. I kind of assumed that it was meant, that was kind of to make you think, hey, this is kind of, we're reaching into the internals. It's kind of weird. It's like we're using it for debugging. It's not something that you can just usually play around with. And even if you type _ proto in the console of like your browser, it won't autocomplete for you. But if you do type the whole thing out and then hit enter, it will show that value. Any other questions? Yeah.
Did you see where that object.create is available? What version of JavaScript is?
I think it's ECMAScript 5. Yes? OK, I'm seeing yes. Yeah. So and I believe that works in IE9 and up, I think. Yes?
I see a lot of times object.create player.prototype, not player. Is there a big difference?
I can get into that a little bit. Essentially, all you're passing in is that first argument is an object, and player.prototype is an object. So it kind of is up to what your goal is there. Okay, I want to go ahead and move on. I want to talk about constructor functions. I read an interesting blog post that kind of says that object.create is more sensical as far as creating objects. However, this is still a very key part of the language, and a lot of current and older code uses this type of format. So I want to try to explain it, and hopefully I can achieve that in this talk. So we have our constructor function here called player. So pretend like, let's say we're making a game, and we need a player object, a player class, if you will. So we have player, has 3 properties. He has a name, hit points, and a flag if they're poisoned or not. And so what we can do now is we can invoke the new operator and make new instances of that class. So we have a Steve and we have an Alex variable that are players, and we give them attributes. And then I have this interesting line here, player.magic.rollCall equals function. So what I'm doing is I'm adding this roll call method onto player.magic. So those of you who are familiar with JavaScript might find this weird, and I will explain it in a second. But just go with me on this. So then we call Steve.rollCall and Alex.rollCall, and it works. It's like we gave this class a function that all their instances are able to use. So the takeaway is that somehow, by adding properties on this magic object, somehow our class instances were able to access it. And so in other words, like I was saying before, it's kind of like a bucket to put public class methods on. So the truth is I'm lying. That object isn't called magic, but it does exist, and it's just by another name. And I changed the name to hopefully make this talk more coherent. And hopefully by the end, you'll understand why I did that. And I'll explain what it actually is called later. But I just don't want to confuse everyone right off the bat. OK, so how does this magic property work? Well, let's dig deeper to figure that out. So let's boil away our constructor function. We just have now a simple function that does nothing. And here's what we get. We get this function called player. And for some reason, it just comes with this magic object automatically. So what's going on? By default, every function in JavaScript has an object called magic. It's built into the language. And again, it's not actually called magic, but just stick with me. It does exist, it just has a different name. So what's the deal with this object? Well, let's focus on new. So we already saw this code. This is us making a new player. So what happens when we actually use the new operator? You may not be aware, but there's a couple things that JavaScript does. First, we make a brand new empty object. Then we're going to populate that object with all the things we passed into the constructor as arguments. We're going to bind this to it, which that is outside of the scope of this. I don't want to get into it too much. That could be its own talk. And then we set the object's prototype, its proto property, to that magic object. So I know that's kind of confusing, so I have a few slides that hopefully demonstrate that. So again, here's our player constructor, as you already saw. So first step is we make a brand new object. Then we're going to populate it with the various fields we passed in. So we give it a name, hit points, and if it's poisoned or not. But then what's interesting is that we set its prototype to that magic object there. And again, this is just built into JavaScript. This is how the new system and how functions work. So if you're still with me, continuing, let's make a new player called Alex. And this is what it's going to look like. We just added a new player here. We made it with the new operator. And both of their prototypes are porting to that magic object. So where it gets really interesting is we're going to add that function, that roll call method, which is just for the players to announce who they are, to that magic object. So player.magic.rollCall, that's what it would look like. We have now a function on this weird magic object. And if I boil down this diagram a bit, this is what we have. And if you remember from the beginning of the talk, this is the same type of prototype inheritance, the same type of prototype chain that we're used to. So if Steve calls roll call, JavaScript is going to look for roll call here. It's not going to find it. And it's going to move down the prototype chain to this player.magic object, and it's going to find it there. So that then if we call Steve.rollCall, it'll say, hi, my name is Steve. Alex will say, hi, my name is Alex. So to recap, when we use the new operator, we set that proto property to the constructor function's magic object, and that's just what new does. And the net result is that you can add properties to that magic object, and now all of a sudden all your instances are able to access it. Okay, so now I'm going to explain the magic thing. To come clean, this property is actually called prototype. And the reason I changed the name is because this is what the actual code looks like. It's player.prototype.rollCall. The reason I changed the name is because functions in JavaScript are going to have a prototype object, which I called magic before, and they're going to have an actual prototype, proto, and they're different things. So when I'm talking about a function, I can talk about its prototype, which points here to the global function, or I can talk about its prototype object, which is not its prototype. It's just an object that JavaScript gives you. So hopefully I'll explain this in a second, why JavaScript does this, because it's really confusing. So okay, you can see for yourself, if you make a new function and try to access, so it's a brand new function, we try to access its prototype, it will return an empty object. So it's there. And you make a new function, it will have this prototype object. And then you can also see if we make a player function and see if its prototype is equal to its, the prototype object on the function is equal to its prototype, it will return false. They are different things. So the reason I think that JavaScript does this is because really what's happening is the instances of your class, the Steve object that we created, its prototype is pointing to that function's prototype object. So when you see, for example, player.prototype, what it's referring to is it's actually referring to the prototypes of its children, of its instances of the class. So hopefully that makes somewhat sense as to why I changed the name there. Because I don't want to confuse everyone off the bat. I don't know if you're still confused, but the slides are still up there if you need to get a second run through. But moving on, prototype is dynamic. So for example, let's say we try to access a die function on our Steve object here. And it's going to throw an error because I haven't showed you die yet. So there's no code that does that. But assuming that we could recover from that error, we could then add that die method to our player.prototype object. And then all of a sudden, when we try to run it again, it's going to work. So up here, it didn't exist. We added it, and then it works. So the reason I bring that up is that you can do interesting stuff like polyfills, for example. So if you're not familiar with that term, basically you can add features to the language in an older browser. So if you want to use the array for each method, it might not exist in IE7, IE8. So then you can check for that, and then if it doesn't exist, you can then just add it to the language using JavaScript code instead of native code. But, and this is kind of a contrived example, but you could, for example, overwrite the getTime method of date to just blow out the page and just say it's time to relax. So you would never normally do that, but what I'm trying to point out is that you don't really want to tamper with the built-in stuff in JavaScript unless you know what you're doing or it's for a polyfill. Because if you implement this code in a library and then someone uses your library on the page and they happen to use the getTime method, it's going to screw them up. And it's going to be hard for them to figure out why this is breaking for them. So note before we continue, everything I've added to this prototype object has been a function, but I just want to point out it's just an object, so we can just add values to it. So we can introduce a variable that's just a number 50, and that will work. So the final thing here is what happens when you iterate over an object in JavaScript. So we have everything we've already seen before, and now we're going to iterate over Steve. And we're going to trace out all the properties that exist on the Steve object. So we're going to get name, we're going to get hit points, we're going to get is poisoned. Those are all up here. We passed it in. But then we're also going to get roll call, which is that function that we have on its constructor's prototype object. So what you need to use in this case, or you can use, is hasOwnProperty. HasOwnProperty is the way in JavaScript where you can distinguish between things that an object actually owns itself and other things that exist further down the prototype chain. So if we then filter this for loop so that we're only looking for stuff that Steve actually owns on itself, we'll get name, hit points, is poisoned, but we won't get roll call. And that's what we want in this example. And then just to point out, there's also object.getOwnPropertyNames, which does a similar thing. It just returns an array. So summary. Every object in JavaScript has a proto property, and that points to that object's prototype. If a property can't be found on the object, JavaScript's going to use its prototype inheritance mechanism to look for that object further down its prototype chain. All functions have a prototype object, and this is different from its actual prototype. And objects with the new creator, or used with the new operator, have their proto property pointing to the constructor function's prototype, which is a confusingly named but convenient place to put class methods. And then last thing I just explained, but has own property lets you then filter out things an object owns from things that exist further down its prototype chain. So I highly recommend this first link here, a plain English guide, which I got some of my material from. And then a bunch of these links are pretty good. I have 2 books I recommend are Secrets of the JavaScript Ninja, which is by the guy that wrote jQuery, and Testable JavaScript, which is really good. And that's it. Questions? Yes.
URL?
Yeah.
And I take it you'll be pasting that as a comment right there in tonight's talk.
I will. In fact, I could maybe do that right now. If I could spell.
Oh, no, that's our main website. That won't post. Oh, you.
Well, I was going to go to the, yeah, except I can't. Oh, no.
You can't. That's why.
Well, okay. Let me get out of
It
this.
automatically drops it.
Okay,
as
hold
soon as
on.
it goes up there. Don't worry about it. You can put it up later.
Yeah, I'll put it up later.
Just keep an eye out for it.
There we go. So if you just go to this URL, you'll find it. Yes?
I just wanted to add on like a little bit of information to the stuff we're reading up. This is all stuff you should know, but with ECMAScript 6, classes come into play, which make this a lot easier. But there's a library out, it came out, it just like popped up out of nowhere a couple months ago called 6 to 5, and it transpiles ECMAScript 6 into ECMAScript 5 code. So, but the goal of the developer was to make it so it's efficient but very readable code. So if you're familiar with some other, classy or object-oriented programming language, you can easily get started writing classes in ECMAScript 6, compile it down to production ECMAScript 5 code, and really see how these, the prototype will
That's awesome.
inheritance works.
Cool, thank you. Other questions? Yes.
This is just sort of for my own curiosity. What's the prototype of a new function? Is it just object?
A prototype of a new function is going to be an empty object.
Okay, but it's a different empty object than the actual prototype value on the function.
I think so.
Who's on first?
Right. I'm not sure. I'll have to get back to you. Anything
Any
else?
other questions? No more? There we
One
go.
more.
I guess my question is like, do you have any examples of, I guess, real world applications that use prototype.js?
Yeah.
Different type of like, is it in this case it looks like it was like some type of game, or is it like widgets or things like that? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. So just one quick note: Prototype.js is a library. Just to clear that up. But yeah. So prototype. A lot of stuff written in JavaScript, if it wanted to do any sort of class-like stuff, like if you wanted to have a reusable function, a lot of it used and still uses the new operator and prototype. I think when you first start using it, it's pretty simple. It's just that when you run into things you don't expect, and then you try to dig deeper, that it gets kind of gross. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of code out there that uses this. And that's kind of why I put it up here, so to hopefully explain it as best I could. Okay.
Is that it?
Thanks, guys.
All right. All right, so real quick, there's this pretty awesome thing that's happening in 3 months. 3 months. So I'm going to let Daniel come up and talk about it really quickly because it's one of his projects. And then Sergio, as soon as he gets ready to go, then we'll have him get his stuff up and going.
Is it working?
Yes, it's working. Stand by the podium, those things, yeah.
My name is Daniel Walker, and I'm in Starter Studio, and we're asking for your donation. No, I'm just kidding. And I started Starter Studio under one startup, and then we kind of abandoned that and switched to one called Fat Merchant. And some people here have heard of us. And I forgot the swag, but I will be bringing stickers and other junk for you guys next time. However, we are doing a hackathon for all the normal reasons, and there will be prizes. And here's the theme of the hackathon: disruptive payment stuff. So if you are a designer or a project manager or a developer or an artist or a musician, whatever, we will have several categories, and there will be cash prizes. There will be the Red Bull girls. This would be a good opportunity to come have a fun day working on a project, and then maybe taking it to a group of investors or whatever you want to do after that. A lot of good stuff comes out of hackathons. This will be on May 9th, and I will come back and remind everyone during the following or the upcoming months. And we do have a link. It's on Eventbrite. You can actually just search for Fat Merchant. It's FATT because it stands for Fast Affordable Transaction Tools. And it's called Fat Merchant. So what we are as a company, just very quickly, is a subscription-based credit card processing platform. Unlike Square and stuff like that that charges per swipe, we just charge per month. So customers are starting to come to us and save 20 to 40% just right off the bat by being able to pay a subscription monthly fee. So it's great, it's going good, and we aren't going to copy your ideas, but we want to see what you come up with, and we'll be scouting for talent and all that. If you have questions, ask me afterwards. I will be at the beer thing, and like I said, I will continue to come to these meetups and remind people. Stay awesome.
You're welcome, my dear. Also, too, while Sergio's plugging up here, there you go, darling. Another thing as well, I will send out the exact dates for it, but he just reminded me of it. In April, I believe it's the beginning of April, Orlando Tech Week is going to happen again. If you guys did not know about it or did not hear about it, it happened last October. It was an entire week long. There was different seminars, different lunch and learns, and then we had some pretty cool, fun things going on at night. So it's happening again in April. I will be a big part of organizing all of that as well. So as I get more info on it, I will make sure I blast about it. I'm pretty much going to go bug Orlando Tech next week. So I will let you guys keep posted on that. But it is the beginning of April. I do know that much. So that is a must to go. We will figure out. Maybe we'll do a special thing or whatever to make sure we can get some of you guys out there. Who knows? But now it's on to Sergio. This is his first JavaScript talk with us. Woohoo!
Before I get started, I want to make a quick public announcement. A couple weeks ago, we started a Slack channel, if you will, called Orlando Devs. And it's been amazing. So I did want to let you guys know it's already about 100 people in there, a little bit more than that. It has been amazing. I've learned so much in there already. It's been crazy. So if you're interested in joining, it is a closed group. It is you do need an invite to join. So that's my Twitter account right there, #Serge. If you're interested, just hit me up on there, and I'll make sure you get an invite so that you can join us. It's really cool. But I'm not here to talk about that. So I'm here to talk about Yeoman. Does anybody here know about Yeoman? Cool. All right. So keep me in check, guys. If I say anything stupid, just correct me right away. No, I'm joking. But before things get started, who is Sergio Cruz? The guy holding the magic mouse for whatever reason. I don't know. I'm a developer here in Orlando. Been focusing on JavaScript for a couple of years. I absolutely love it. And I love startups as well. One of my favorite things to do, I've been listening to this awesome podcast called How to Start a Startup. It's actually this class in Stanford, and they just recorded the whole thing. It's amazing. So anyway, I'm a geek at heart. I also love drones and stuff. I own the Parrot 2.0 myself. It has this awesome open SDK, and I just love doing stuff to it. So this is me. It's what I do. And before I actually get started on Yeoman, I want you guys to remember two main things, words, I guess, conventions and best practices. Hook that to your mind. This is going to be important moving forward. This is going to be important on, why we're talking about what we're talking about. So, typical story, right, when you're starting a new app. First, you're probably, just coming up with the requirements, figuring out what is it that you need, what is it that you're building. Once you have that, then you're probably, okay, well, what technologies am I going to use? What's going to be my tech stack, right? And I'm sure every developer has gone through that at some point or another. If you're using a very opinionated framework, you don't really care too much about what the directory structure is going to be like. You already know exactly, if you're using an MVC framework, you already know exactly where your controllers go, where your models go. If you're not using an opinionated frameworks, then chances are you're wasting time with that as well. You're like, oh, okay, well, what am I going to do this time, right? What have I learned recently that I can apply to this app this time? And ultimately, how are you going to package that in production? I mean, do you even care about that? Hopefully you do, right? So get started. You're coding. It's awesome. It's almost ready, but, we're talking JavaScript here, and we're talking mostly, client-side work. You're super proud of your app. You go to Chrome, run that. Your boss tells you to run that Chrome audit too, because it thinks, that's what actually validates a good website versus a bad one. Sure enough, it starts screaming at you. One of the first things it tells you, hey, man, or woman, your source code's not minified. What is this? We're wasting all these bytes on white space. Why are you even doing that? If you have a second developer joining to help you out, and they don't really know about your own conventions, then chances are it's going to be a nightmare as well. And then chances are they're going to bring their own conventions to the table as well. And now you guys are, just knocking heads like, oh my goodness, what is it that we're going to do? Everything's a manual process. From when you're creating a new file, you got to go into your current directory, make that new file, add that reference to the index.html or whatever HTML file you use. And hopefully, if you're unit testing, and I hope you are, then now you're making that manually too, right? There's a lot of manual process here, and we're developers. I mean, really, we're developers because we love automating stuff. Then what the heck are we doing this stuff manually over and over and over again? And that's where Yeoman comes in. Now, I'm going to read right out of the bullet points. A few things that describe Yeoman. Yeoman is a web scaffolding tool. It proposes full-blown workflows. It includes thousands of generators. It is not a framework, and it doesn't make you coffee. And if that didn't make any sense to you, then follow this goat here saying what? Can you guys hear it? What?
What?
All right, what? What? Well, it's all thanks to our friend here, David K. Say hi, Dave. No, seriously, I promised him I was gonna do a shout out to David. He always has freaking random goats on his presentations. I don't get it, but I promised him. You know what, man? When I do my first presentation, there's gonna be a random goat in there. Sure enough. What?
Two others. What? Presentation.
What?
They've been random good. Nothing to do with anything good.
What?
Random good.
What? This is great. Okay, I could do this all. All right, seriously though. From Yeoman's homepage, and I'm just gonna read this a little bit because I love how they worded this, right? So straight up to what Yeoman does. Yeoman helps you kickstart new projects, prescribing best practices. That keyword we were talking about in the beginning, best practices. Keep that hooked to your mind. And tools to help you stay productive. It includes thousands of generators, like I said before. And a generator is basically a plugin that can be run with the Yo command to scaffold complete projects or useful parts. If this still doesn't make much sense to you, don't worry about it. If you're like me, you kind of learn by doing. This is not so much a presentation. We are going to be doing some live coding here, so hopefully it'll kind of come together in your mind. But before we get started, now again, in this talk, we're going to be focusing a lot on Angular and how it comes together with Yeoman. So before we get started with the Angular generator, we do need a couple of tools installed. So Yeoman, we already talked about Yeoman. We're going to be installing Grunt. Grunt's a task. Everybody knows what Grunt is here? Anybody? All right, so it's a task manager. It automates things for you, right? And you'll see how we use it very frequently when using Yeoman. Now, this is kind of interchangeable in the JavaScript community, like anything else right now. There's always the best of, right? The next generation of. So, we could talk Yeoman, and then, Gulp came along, and then Broccoli was the next best thing or whatever. We're not here to, argue of any of that. Generator Angular is actually the officially supported Angular generator by the Yeoman community, and it uses Grunt, and that's what we're going to be using. Bower is a package manager for the front end. The cool thing about Bower is that it's kind of sort of works like NPM for Node. Thing is, NPM kind of gets a little weird, especially when you're importing CSS files. It doesn't really fit, right? When you're importing an NPM file, you're expecting to be able to, require the library in your JavaScript file and do something against it. Like I said, but a lot of people use that for the browser as well, through Browserify and whatnot. But Bower is really the way to go, especially for front-end tools. And that's what they use. So anyway, to install them, this is the little command right here. We're not going to be doing it live. It does take a little while, but just keep that in mind. So why use the Angular generator? So like I said, we're going to be focusing on Angular. Now Angular, like many other frameworks, especially like Backbone, it's not very opinionated. With that, there's a lot of different ways to solve the same problems. And that becomes especially important when you guys are working in a team, right? When there's not a set way of doing things, then it's not really productive. Every time you're solving a problem, you're solving it in a different way. That's where, conventions come along. I really like the Angular generator because it gives you a predictable workflow and a predictable directory structure. What that means is that every time you're making a new controller, you know exactly where that controller is going to go. You're not debating, this time in this Angular app is all of my controllers going to be in the same controllers.js file kind of thing. No. That's already been solved for you. So it adds some quote unquote opinions to Angular that is a non-opinionated framework. What I absolutely love about it too is that there is a build process right off the bat. What happens there, and we will go through it, it will minify your files for you right off the bat. It'll group all of them together, minify them, minify your CSS files. If you have any images in your folder, which chances are you do, it'll also compress them for you. So that's nice, right? So typical generator Angular workflow, and I hate saying generator Angular because it doesn't feel like grammatically correct. So I'm gonna be calling it Angular generator, but don't try to look for that on GitHub. Just saying. Yo Angular controller space full. This little command here will do a lot of things for you. It'll generate a new controller. what does generating even mean, right? Well, let's go through it. So it'll add the controller file to your directory. So there's your app directory, scripts, controllers. Here's the new file right here. It'll also add your test file for you. You non-testers, you're going to hate this. It's already there, no excuses. Yeoman also adds that reference to your index.html file. I don't know about you guys, but I've added like a file manually to my directory, and then I'm like refreshing the page like crazy, trying to figure out like why this new functionality isn't working. Sure enough, I just forgot to include it in the freaking HTML file. It'll do that for you. Don't worry about it. I especially want you to look at these two comments, HTML comments here. You see this right here, build.js /scripts.js and build. This is how Yeoman, or the Angular generator, will actually group those files at the build process. And like I said, we are going to be doing this live here. It'll group all of these files, minify them, uglify them, do all that fun stuff for you. And it'll put it in a folder called scripts/scripts.js. So that way, when your actual users are using your application, they're not making thousands of requests to just get your app up and running. It'll be all crunched up together, real nice and stuff. And lastly, it'll actually generate the actual controller for you. It'll type out, who needs to be repetitive, right? Why would you want to keep typing angular.module.controller.this, that all every time? It'll do it for you. It's amazing. All right, so let's do some live coding. Any questions so far, by the way? Are we good? All right, cool. Let's get you the fun stuff. First thing I want to show you guys is this awesome command called grunt serve. What grunt serve will do, and it takes a little second, it'll actually make your current, so you see here my current directory, sites, talks, Yeoman, Angular. It will make that current directory, it'll make like a little server out of that current directory. And here we go. We got the Yeoman just hello world page. Now, by the way, I forgot to mention this. If you do want to generate a new app, this is all you have to do right here. Yo Angular app name. I'm not doing this live because it does download a lot of dependencies. I don't want to make you guys wait, but this is all you have to do right here. It's really nice. Yo Angular space whatever you want to call your app. So again, I just got done doing this before starting this talk. We just did a grunt serve. Here we have our app. Have a little about route right here. Can you guys see that? Home. Pretty simple stuff, right? Let me show you guys the code. So here we got the actual directory. If I can zoom in here a little bit, you guys can see what it looks like. App, scripts. So basically we have our Bower components. This is our external components. We actually installed Angular through Bower. Your node modules for the workflow tools. Your test files, this is where they are. The spec folder is basically mimicking your app folder right here, or actually your scripts folder. So anything you have under controllers, you will also have under test, which is really nice. It's very predictable, like I said. So we got a little, main controller here. It has a little array, awesome things. All right, let's do the fun stuff. Forget all this boring crap. Let's generate a new route. We're going to call it foo. 3 things are going to happen here when I press enter. It's going to generate a new controller. It's going to add a new route to our application. By the way, you guys familiar with Angular a little bit? Yeah? Our app.js is where we actually declare our module. This is where we define our routes. So we got 2 routes right now. Root, about, and then anything other than that will redirect user to the root route. Press enter. Here we go. We generated a new route, /foo. Let's make this lowercase. It generated a new template for us, foo.html. It's right here under views. Foo. It also generated a controller, like I said. Pretty awesome, right? Awesome things. And it also generated a test. Let me show you guys that real quick. Foo.js. So we got our test running. All right. Now let's actually add some fun to this, all right? So let me go into my index.html. Remember how we had like a little nav bar here? This is something Yeoman can't do for you. So let's add a link there real quick to go to /foo. Let's duplicate this line. If I even know how to do this anymore. Apparently I don't. Here we go. Foo. Obviously we need to do a grunt serve. While that takes a little second for it to start, I want to change some things around here. I really don't want or don't care for this awesome things array here. We're going to be declaring something new. We're going to be declaring an array of interests. And we're just going to be spitting out those interests. And I got them right here. We're going to be spitting them out on the view. So here we go. We like sports. We like things about the city, animals, food, and stuff, right? On food.html. You guys are familiar. Like you said you are familiar with Angular, right? All we're doing is a little ng repeat, interest and interests. And let's spit that out. And I need to fix this, don't I? Awesome. Interest. Let's see if this worked. Ha! By the way, guys, I really want to show you this because I love it. All right. Now let me show you why I love this thing so much.
I wonder how many people just did that.
All right. What if you get rid of 3 interests and save the file? Will something happen? Oh, here we go. It refreshed automatically. Yeoman does that for us through grunt. Since we're serving this through grunt, it adds a watch. Excuse me. A watch service, and basically what it does is it's detecting changes on your JavaScript files or on your templates, and it's refreshing the pages for you on the browser. So you don't have to keep going back, Command R, refresh the page, yada yada. It's doing that for you automatically. It's really neat. Now this is kind of boring. I mean, it's cool, like showing a list of interests. I'm wondering if we could have like a few images in there. So I'm just gonna copy some codes here that I left ready because I don't want to waste too much of your guys' time. So something really cool I just added here. And you know what? Let me just hard code this for now. So now we have the list of interests with an image right below it. Are you guys familiar with Lorem Pixel? Sports. Lorem Pixel would you can just throw like random keywords on it and it'll just return you like random images, which is pretty cool. So I'm just hard coding it to sports. So even though this interest right here is a city, it's still returning the same sports image or whatever. But we can make this dynamic, right? I mean, it's Angular after all. Let's call it interest. Cool. Got a bunch of random images in there. That's pretty cool. And I didn't have to refresh the browser. That's even more cool. Now, I don't like how that looks. So let's go ahead and style it. What did I call that div? I called it full container. By the way, when you're installing your new app, it's going to ask you, do you want to use Sass? Do you want to use Compass with that? Do you want to drop Bootstrap right into it? I clicked yes on every single one of those items. You're welcome to do the same. Why not, right? Yeah, man. That stuff's great. All right. Let's just add some colors there real quick. Let's make it float. I made some notes here because I didn't want to forget anything. I like my stuff pretty. Margin. And then the images inside. Since we are using Sass and we are using Bootstrap, we can extend some of the Bootstrap classes or even mix-ins, if you will. So this, I don't know if you guys ever use Bootstrap or not, but they have this class available called image thumbnail. I'm just extending it right into my image. By the way, you see how I'm declaring the image within foo container? This is a Sass thing. It's pretty awesome. By the way, David K is doing a presentation on Sass in a couple weeks. So if you like this stuff and if you're not really familiar with it, that's going to be the way to go right there. Not in this meetup, but at the front end meetup. Anyway, let's go ahead and let's see. Let's give it a height and a width, 200 pixels real quick. Now here's why I'm doing this, right? I'm going to save this. It detected the change to my main.css. It's running Compass. Compass takes a little second to load. And once it's done, voila! It reloaded automatically and it's all pretty and stuff. Pretty cool, right? All right. I think we're only missing one main thing here. And the TDD guys are like wanting to kill me right now. Why didn't you test that thing before you actually wrote the controller? Come on, guys, I just declared a freaking array. But let's do it. Let's do it. So we got the actual controller and we got the test side by side. And I'm just going to go ahead and maximize this. So when we initially generated the controller, I don't know if you guys remember, but it was using that awesome things array that I got rid of. I'm gonna go ahead and just replace that stuff for interest. Are you guys familiar with testing in JavaScript at all? This is probably not, most of you aren't. This is just Jasmine. It basically, on it, you're just describing what you're testing and then executing those, and then basically executing the expecs and whatnot. Feel free to look up the Jasmine documentation. Again, this all ships with Yeoman right off the bat, so it's really cool. So I'm writing a wrong test on purpose. If you guys notice here, I have 6 interests, but yet our test is expecting it to be 3. Now I want to show you 2 things, and check this out how cool this is. I just want to be able to run this while we have it open. Every time we save a file under the test folder, it'll run the tests for you automatically. So here we go. It detected the change. Karma kicked in. Oh my goodness, it's red. Full controller should attach a list of interests. Failed. This is our test right here. We know what's wrong. We know that interest actually has 6 items, but we're expecting it to be 6. Let's go ahead and fix it. Change it to 6. Let's watch the terminal go. Here we go. Boom, it's all green. We're good. Executed 3 of 3. Success. We're good to go. TDD, guys? Whatever, man. Yeah? Now, the last step I want to show you guys, and this is one of my favorite parts. Let's stop serving.
How excited you are over this.
I love this stuff. I mean, I promise you, I do. Grunt build. So basically, this is doing the step that I described previously. It's gonna minify all of your files. Here we go, image min. Did you guys see that? Oh my goodness, something broke. I don't know what happened. That looks interesting. Maybe Maybe I don't have my NPN stuff installed. Whatever. Oh, I might know what it is. No, I got the right number. Come on, that's the fun part about freaking live hacking and stuff, man. Stuff gotta break. Did it even make anything? Oh, we got a disk directory. Oh, only the images are going through. I don't care about the images. Come on, NG annotate. Man, this was my favorite. Now, this is one of the things I hate about it. When stuff fails, dude, like, good luck. Like, good luck. It is not self-explanatory at all. The only thing we know here is that it was probably on the ng annotate task, so we can go to the grunt file and see what happens there. I know, right? Something with my prototype's wrong here. Let's try to run grunt annotate. Here, it's grunt annotate that's breaking. I don't know what's wrong with it. Maybe, let me change my node version. See if that'll help. Yeah, it's not gonna work. I'm sorry, guys. Oh, this sucks. I really want to show you this. Yeah, whatever. I'm gonna quit trying. Well, what would have happened was it would have crunched up all of those files for you, uglified it, including CSS and JavaScript, and it would have left it ready for production. Now, I must have screwed something up here, so I'm sorry. Now, if you guys have any questions about actually installing Yeoman, since we didn't actually go through that, feel free to, hit me up on Twitter or something. I'll be glad to maybe write a blog post about it or something like that. Now, two quick things I wanted to touch before we end here. Are you not happy with these conventions? Do you think that module-based stuff is better than how Yeoman uses it? No problem. Two things you can do right off the bat. You can fork the code and make some pull requests, right? Or you can make your own generator. That's the really cool thing about Yeoman. Yeoman actually has a generator to make new generators. So if you're not happy with how things work or whatever, just make your own. It really doesn't matter. And the learning doesn't need to stop here. I have a bunch of links here that you guys can check out. Here's the link to my slides right here. I'll be happy to post that on the meetup page as well. And so you guys can click around and learn more. But in a nutshell, that's it. I'm sorry about grunt build. I really don't know what happened there. Any question, guys? I know there's got to be some. There you go, Daniel in the back. We can try. Probably not. Grunt. I suspect it won't, because it's actually failing on the ng annotate part, which is actually what does most of the work on the Angular side. We can try though. It still failed, but it just skipped right through it. Let's see what happens. I wonder. Here we go, done, but with warnings. I'm gonna delete all this stuff here. It failed again. All right, so with force, hopefully it'll produce something that I can at least show you guys. We got a new dist directory here. Oops. Here we go. Now, in that dist directory, you got views. Now, we got, yeah, it didn't do much. It's really neat because what will happen is it'll actually minify. Oh, wait, here we go. Something happened. You see how it actually minified your HTML as well? This is awesome. This is one of my favorite things. I feel like such a pro when I do this. I'm like, oh, snap. Minified HTML. This is great. I feel like the Matrix guy, with all the green letters coming through. That's exactly how I feel. Here we go. So we got minified files right here. Let me disable the The thingy matrix word wrap. Here we go. So this is our actual code right here. It's all uglified and stuff. It's super ugly, and it's exactly what we want. We want it to be ugly because that's what Google Chrome likes on the freaking audit too. It's not very human friendly, but it's not supposed to be. Vendors, same thing. All your Angular source code and whatnot, this is where it's actually going to be. If you choose to use jQuery in your directory, it'll do the same thing. Like I've stated before, this all happens through the comments. It's really nice. So build vendor.js will group all those files and uglify them for us. The build scripts.js will do the same thing. And they produce these two files right here. Let me see if I can zoom in again. Now you see how there's like some random numbers after the name? I don't know about you guys, but I've pushed an app before, and then people start calling me, oh my goodness, it's all broken or whatever. Sure enough, cache is not invalidating in their browser for whatever reason. Well, the Yeoman guys thought of that. So they basically generate a new string every time, attach that to your index.html, so that these files are never cached. I mean, it's great. Like, it's just never going to break. Like it's bugs free and everything. Like, it's great. Any more questions, guys? Thank you. This kind of worked, I guess. I don't know what was happening, but that worked. Any more questions? Yeah. So that's a really good question. Yeoman itself is not really built for that, or at least not the Angular generator. But what you can use the grunt file and all of the conventions that they include to kind of, modify it a little bit and use it in your own app. So if you already have, say a PHP app going or whatever, you can use those same conventions in there. Again, the Angular generator is all open source, so I'm pretty sure you can dig through the code and kind of, change stuff around enough that it'll actually work. I don't really recommend doing that though. But again, that's one of the things that you can do. Anybody else? No? Well, thank you guys. Appreciate it.